So first to the inconclusive Anambra State governorship election. Charles Chukwuma Soludo well ahead with what one Arise senior editor described as a statistically unassailable lead, but knowing that it is still mathematically possible for him to be outvoted. That unlikely scenario could well become reality in the topsy-turvy world of Nigerian politics. The key determinant is going to be voter turnout. The numbers across the state were quite low, arguably the lowest in recent times. The other is a supplementary ballot that does not compromise the integrity of the election process and increase disaffection in the state. So what can we expect going forward? Well, for analysis of the Anambra State governorship election so far, I'm joined now in the studio by Cynthia Mbamalu, Director of Programs at Yiaga Africa, an NGO that promotes democratic governance and development, and by Arise Abuja, Head of News and Political Editor Sumner Sambo. Thank you very much indeed to both of you for joining us. Let me come to you first. As I mentioned, one very senior editor at Arise News thinks that the figures suggest that Charles Soludo is statistically unassailable, but it is still mathematically possible for him to be outvoted, isn't it?
Yes, it's still possible, but I guess so. If you look at the turnout alone for Anambra, it's between 10 to 12% projected turnout, so about 260-something thousand votes out of 2-point-something million. Now, Yiaga is the only LGA remaining. Yiaga has about 148 registered voters.
48,000.
48,000
right.
Registered voters. But if you look at turnout, if we look at assess the general turnout in the state, and then juxtapose that with what we're expecting in Yiaga, it's almost unlikely that you'd have 100% turnout,
Absolutely.
right? And considering that Yiaga is quite a peculiar LGA, and why is that peculiar? On Saturday, one of the reasons the elections couldn't hold was also security threat. And so beyond logistics challenge was also the fact that they have major security threats. So some communities just said, no, you cannot vote, and stopped voters from even going to the polls. So we expect to see something like that on Tuesday, 9th of November. So there's a likelihood that you wouldn't have as much turnout. So if just going by this analysis, we're not expecting to see 100% turnout. And what that would mean is it's statistically, it may be impossible to change the outcome. However, we can't make any final decision until it happens on Tuesday. Let's watch and see what happens on elections day.
And of course, Sumner, Head of News at Arise Abuja. I mean, a whole Arise team out there in Anambra State. One of the correspondents from Arise News was saying earlier that the key determinant, as she correctly pointed out, has got to be voter turnout. Given the apathy that we've seen so far, do you expect a bigger turnout in that constituency here?
Well, Charles,
local government.
We could actually have that if the politicians mobilize so much tonight, considering the lead. I mean, if any of the top three candidates get 1/3 of the entire voters in Yiaga, it could actually mean something bad for the person who is having a lead right now, or it could mean an unassailable lead by Chukwuma Soludo, for example, if it goes in its favor. And if you look at the demography of that particular constituency we're talking about, Yiaga, it's well populated by a lot of young people. And so it behoves on both the three political parties that are leading right now to actually ensure that their centers, the centers where they are collating their results, are able to sit down, analyze, and then take a look at the grassroots formation of that particular local government and see if they could reach people by mobile phones and all of that. I mean, if we could have a very great turnout in that local government, it would be helpful to the entire election, because I mean the turnout has been very, very abysmally low.
And it will certainly strengthen the idea of a mandate, won't it?
At least by now, people should have believed that the system is working despite the initial challenges. So we should encourage voters to come out. If we have, about 148,000 voters in that local government, I can tell you that it has the tendency to actually tilt this result. But what are the politicians actually going to be telling the electorate between now and tomorrow?
And whether it's going to be enough to...
the bimodal voter authentication system work perfectly? If it does, and the turnout is good, there may be a very good result.
Right.
But if it doesn't turn out working very well, just like we noticed, then I mean, it would discourage those who have turned out early on election day.
And just following up on that, Cynthia, can this Anambra election be said to have been a test more for INEC than for anyone else? Because I mean, everybody worried about security and a lot of things, and that seems not to have been the central problem.
Yeah, I think it's more of a test on INEC, and perhaps one of the things that would have been very valuable before the elections is for a more honest conversation by the Electoral Commission with stakeholders and citizens in highlighting the possible challenges, just so as to manage expectations. Because one of the things we saw in the pre-elections was there was a lot of encouragement, or the expectations were just really high. So it seemed like security was the only challenge. And if you solve security, then every other thing would be
absolutely
fine. But what we saw on Saturday was the fact that it was beyond security. It was a combination of several factors, beginning from logistics management to as far back as procurement issues. So if you look at procurement, for instance, as simple as permanent voters card collections, the Electoral Commission did not commence the collection process for PVCs until the week of the elections for the new registrants. That was pretty late. So by the eve of elections, PVCs were still being collected. So this is one of the elections in recent times where we do not have figures of PVCs collected before the elections, which in itself could create opportunities for manipulation, because you're not expected to have turnout of voters or percentage of votes shares in a particular vote cast in a particular polling unit to supersede number of PVCs collected, for instance. But now we went to an elections without a PVCs figure. But this had to do with procurement, because it wasn't a security issue. It's done at the national level. So if that was resolved, we wouldn't have this late commencement of the process of PVC distribution. The other was logistics. And we saw that play out with the trend of late deployment to polls. What is quite striking is that Anambra has consistently had a history of late deployment to polls. So if you go back to 2013 elections, to 2017, and even the 2019 elections. So for instance, in 2017, 30 minutes after polls commenced, only 28% of polling units had opened. In fact, it was only mainly in Awka South and North. 2019, Anambra was one of the states we did a national assessment that commenced voting as late as 10 a.m., 10:30. So what this tells us is, if for a state that has had these peculiar challenges, we expect the commission to have a better plan and review his whole framework for logistics management, issues around procurement, to ensure that there is better contingency plans. But we didn't see that happen on Saturday, which is why we still recorded the perennial challenges of late deployment, late commencement of polls. So overall, we focused on security so much because we thought that was the major issue. But we actually wish that INEC was quite open with us before the elections in highlighting these are the challenges beyond security. That way, we would have there would have been better suggestions on how to support the commission's work. I mean, alternatives like working with security to deploy materials. Consistently, transporters have failed or withdrawn from their commitment on elections day. We've seen that happen more in Anambra State.
So they didn't really engage the way they ought to have done.
So there could be an alternative of saying, okay, let's have security help in moving the material rather than rely on just transporters.
That's a good point. Let me come to you, Sumner. This very low turnout, I mean, it plummeted dramatically, let's face it. Is it because people don't have much faith in the political system? Many are so disillusioned that they see no point in taking part, or is it the fear of separatist violence hanging over people's heads, or what?
Yes, there's a trust deficit in the ability of the state to protect people. And so you've seen top people within the eastern region being killed and nothing happens to them. I mean,
not to talk of ordinary people.
Yeah, so, and people are like, once elections are over, these politicians just go away and they don't think about us. So why should I come out and sacrifice myself? And whether I come out or I don't, there will definitely be a winner. So, you know, all those tendencies. And I just want to also talk about the issues she raised. if INEC had asked the security agencies to actually convey those electoral materials, then there would have been accusations also that INEC is trying to play a game with the security agencies. So that's the fine line.
Point. Yeah,
that's the fine line INEC was trying to, to prevent. Yes, we had the transporters withdrawing at the last minute. What was it? We had even members of the communities trying to prevent people from doing their job, not even the separatist groups. So there's a general apathy. And then considering how there's been this betrayal of trust between politicians over the years, especially in Anambra State, I mean, a lot of people don't have faith in the system, the ability of the system to be able to stand and say, okay, look, we'll protect you if you go out, and not only protect you, protect your vote also. Because we had incidents of vote buying, we had incidents of ballot box snatching, but there were not so much.
And let me just bring you in, Cynthia. Perhaps unsurprisingly, at least one of the other leading parties in Anambra State have alleged that this was a flawed process. Do you expect that these results will be contested in court, briefly?
Well, it's possible because we still have political class that they do not really trust the process. However, our Yiaga Africa's PPT estimate actually shows that the result, as announced by INEC, falls within our estimate and does reflect the vote cast. So we hope parties would respect the decision of the commission.
Sure. Let me give you the final word, Sumner. Could this inconclusive election, in your assessment, fail to bring any one party to power in Anambra State? We've got 30 seconds.
I mean, we've already got the winner emerging, and it's left for the people to actually queue behind. But I can tell you, with the nature of Nigerian politics, this will still end in court.
Okay. Sumner, Sambo, and of course, Cynthia Mbamalu, thank you very much indeed to both of you.